Pick up any smartphone, Samsung, Apple, OnePlus, Motorola, Xiaomi, it really doesn't matter. There is almost certainly a small piece of intellectual property tucked inside that phone that belongs to a company in San Diego called Qualcomm. And, well, Qualcomm is getting paid for it. Every single time that phone is sold, somewhere between 3 and 5% of the wholesale price flows right back to them. A company that designed none of the phone's exterior, assembled none of its parts, and in many cases, didn't even manufacture the physical chips inside of it. So today we're doing an explainer on this hidden financial mechanism operating right inside your pocket.
So when you buy a shiny new device, you naturally assume the money goes straight to the brand on the box, right? Apple gets the Apple money, Samsung gets the Samsung money. But the reality? Qualcomm is taking a cut of almost every single one of those sales.
Just to wrap our heads around the sheer mind-boggling scale of this, back in 2019, Qualcomm projected that 1.85 billion 3G, 4G, and 5G devices would ship globally. I mean, that's an almost unfathomable volume of electronics blanketing the Earth, and basically all of them carry Qualcomm's intellectual property DNA.
And when you multiply those 1.85 billion devices, total device sales were expected to hit a staggering $375 billion. This isn't just some niche tech market. This is quite literally the backbone of global communication.
No, what's genuinely wild is how that translates to Qualcomm's bottom line. Because they collect that 3 to 5% cut of the wholesale price, they generate nearly $19 billion in pure licensing income. Let that sink in for a second. That is almost $19 billion collected just for owning the ideas. This is arguably the most powerful intellectual property business model ever built. And honestly, almost nobody outside the telecom industry understands how it actually works.
Part 1. The founding bet on CDMA.
So, let's rewind a bit. Back in 1985, a 51-year-old MIT electrical engineer named Irwin Jacobs founded Qualcomm down in La Jolla, California, with 6 partners. And almost immediately, he made a decision that pretty much everyone in the industry told him was completely wrong. See, the wireless world in the late 1980s was converging on something called TDMA, Time Division Multiple Access. Europe was building GSM on top of it, Japan had its own variant, and major US companies like AT&T were totally aligned with it. It was the safe industry consensus. Conventional wisdom said the race was over. But Jacobs, he believed a completely different technology, called CDMA, was technically superior. It used these pseudo-random digital sequences to let multiple users transmit simultaneously on the exact same frequency, using spectrum way more efficiently. But the experts literally dismissed it as a niche engineering curiosity. They said it never worked, the handsets would be way too big, too expensive, just too complicated.
Well, Qualcomm went ahead and built a prototype anyway. By 1989, they proved it actually worked. And then they made this massive strategic move. They went straight to the FCC with a simple argument. They basically said, hey, don't mandate a single standard like Europe did, let the free market decide. And amazingly, the FCC agreed. That one decision gave CDMA the breathing room it desperately needed to compete. By 1993, the industry officially adopted a CDMA-based standard. Fast forward to the year 2000, the global 3G framework is finalized, and guess what? All 3 modes of 3G contained elements of Qualcomm's CDMA technology. Overnight, their core patents were baked into the very foundation of literally every 3G network on planet Earth. And here is the brilliant irony of the whole thing. Before CDMA was even officially recognized as a standard, Qualcomm had already started aggressively filing patents and signing licensing agreements with manufacturers who were just, hedging their bets. AT&T signed first, then Motorola, then Nokia, Ericsson, Samsung, LG. As Tony Thornley, Qualcomm's former president, recalled, originally, I don't believe many companies really thought CDMA was going to happen in a big way. They signed anyway. They signed casually, and crucially, they signed entirely on Qualcomm's terms. Talk about incredible strategic foresight.
Part 2. A Tale of Two Businesses.
So, once their patents became the global standard, Jacobs made another huge pivot. He decided to ditch the actual handset and infrastructure manufacturing businesses, selling them off to companies like Ericsson and Kyocera. To him, manufacturing was just a distraction. The real value, that was in the intellectual property. Which leads us to the super ingenious corporate structure Qualcomm uses today. They essentially run 2 businesses that look totally different on the surface, but are deeply, inextricably linked underneath. First, you have QCT. That's the chipset business. They design the physical Snapdragon processors using a fabless model, meaning they do the design, but contract the actual physical manufacturing out to companies like TSMC. Then you have QTL, the licensing business, and wow, this is where the real money lives. QTL sits behind a literal hall of patents at Qualcomm HQ, managing over 119,000 patents planted and pending worldwide. Basically, anyone who wants to make or sell a device using this technology needs a license from them.
Now prepare to have your mind blown by this one statistic. While that licensing business, QTL, only makes up about 20% of Qualcomm's raw revenue, it generates a massive 60% of their total profits. The physical chip business might bring in bigger raw revenue numbers, sure, but the licensing business, that's where the absolutely massive margins live. It is an utter cash machine.
Part 3. The mechanics. The toll road. So how exactly do they extract this crazy amount of value? Well, the specific mechanics of how Qualcomm structures its licensing are where this goes from just impressive to truly extraordinary. The absolute bedrock of their profitability is this notoriously confusing rule called no pass-through. Here is what that actually means in practice. Let's say a phone manufacturer buys chips from a competitor, like MediaTek or Samsung's own chip division. Those chips might be built using Qualcomm's patented wireless tech. Now, you'd logically assume that because the chipmaker already licensed Qualcomm's patents, the phone manufacturer is covered, right? Nope. Buying a chip from an authorized maker just gives you a piece of silicon. It absolutely does not pass through the patent rights to the final device.
Let's step through this because it's wild. Step 1. The chipmaker licenses the IP just to build the chip. Step 2. The phone manufacturer buys that exact chip. But Step 3 is where Qualcomm wins big. The phone manufacturer also has to pay a separate, device-level royalty directly to Qualcomm based on the wholesale price of the entire phone. Think of it like this. Buying the chip is just buying the car, but you still have to pay Qualcomm's toll every single time you want to drive that car on the cellular road. They're effectively getting paid twice.
Part 4. Threats to the Empire.
Naturally, as you can imagine, extraordinary returns eventually attract extraordinary resistance. As smartphones exploded into a massive global business, this incredibly tight control over standard toll fees started causing some serious friction. Governments and massive corporate customers started pushing back hard. Perhaps the highest stakes dispute was with Apple. In 2017, Apple basically said, look, paying a percentage of the entire phone's wholesale price just for the modem technology no longer makes any sense. A modern iPhone is a full-blown computer. So Apple stopped paying royalties entirely and temporarily shifted a huge chunk of its modem business over to Intel, citing unfair practices and trying to break Qualcomm's iron grip on their supply chain.
And it definitely wasn't just Apple. Regulatory bodies worldwide launched a massive assault on this model. We're talking severe global pushback here. Taiwan and Korea levied $1.7 billion in antitrust fines. The European Union handed down a $1.2 billion competition fine. Mega manufacturers like Huawei just completely withheld their royalty payments. And by 2019, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission even got a federal judge to rule that Qualcomm had literally strangled competition. For a minute there, the entire empire looked like it was being dismantled from all sides.
But Qualcomm's IP moat is incredibly, unbelievably deep. Despite all the legal bruises and all the heavy hitters trying to tear down the toll road, the model largely held up. Get this. On the very first day of the Apple-Qualcomm trial, a massive settlement was reached. Apple effectively realized they had to secure the chips they desperately needed for their upcoming 5G phones. The result? Apple paid a lump sum settlement estimated between $4.5 and $4.7 billion, agreed to a new 6-year licensing deal, and went right back to buying Qualcomm modems. Oh, and Intel dropped out of the 5G smartphone modem business just hours later. The toll road remained wide open.
Which brings us to the future. We're right in the middle of the 5G transition, a technology so foundational it's often called the new electricity, meant to connect the Internet of Things, cars, and entire smart cities. And guess whose patents are heavily baked right into the core of 5G? Yep, Qualcomm's. So the big question you really should take away from all this is, as the next era of global connectivity dawns, can Qualcomm pull off this massive licensing maneuver all over again? Can this inescapable toll road continue to tax the global communications grid? It is an absolutely fascinating space to watch. And hey, now you know exactly how the hidden mechanism inside your pocket actually works. Thanks for exploring this explainer with me, and definitely keep questioning how the incredible tech around you really operates.